I'm Kraig Smyth, MyBizGuide, Business of Being Human, with tonight's workshop, Growing Through Addiction. So, growing through addiction, the words that we use to describe these things are important tools, and the way we use the words is important. So, everything that we can do to put little edges in our favor matters. So, I don't like to say, um, you know, dealing with addiction or whatever. I like growing through because it is it is a phenomena that we have to grow in order to get through it. So there's many lessons along the way in addictions, and one of our first workshops was lessons from addiction, and that's a lot of these things. We're going to hear a lot of that. There's going to be a lot of overview. There's going to be a lot of parallels to the transmuting anxiety. I'm not sure if that was a full workshop or just parts of all the other workshop. Lots of parallels, as you know, if you've seen this. But growing through addiction, we have to connect with that growth part. Growth, not growth. That's a super important thing because everything we do has to be organic. If we use that term, if we understand some of these holistic ideas, we want to bond with words that are organic, because a lot of what we're going to be talking about is mental habitat and developing our mental habitat and growing our mental habitat so we can grow more concepts within our mental habitat. That's the cognitive growth and healing, and that's growing the context. And one of these things that we say here is understanding is the soil, an idea is the seed, intention is the water, action is the sunlight. So adding soil is our understanding, adding more understanding, that's a foundation. And a lot of what we learn from addiction and growing through addiction is really foundational for what we're going to encounter in other parts of life. Growing through addiction and understanding addiction is, I think our first experience with that, and everyone's common terminology, is substance abuse. But there's a lot of things within that that help us be actually free, right? Because if we talk about addiction, it's trapping us, it's enslaving us, right? Master of Puppets, we know that one, right? Everyone, Master of Puppets, Metallica, addiction. Okay. Anyways, um, so freedom from ideologies, freedom from addiction really, really transcends the substance abuse component and addiction with the substance component. To understand addiction without the physical ingested substance component. For example, understanding addiction and addiction to ideologies. I think an easier one is addiction to materialistic, right? Um, we could say power, capitalism, addiction to money. There's all kinds of basically recurring negative cycles that are unhealthy for ourselves and those in everything around us. So to understand, what we're looking at here is these negative cycles that people that fall into, and negative cycles without a growth component. So we say cycles, yes, everything's got cycles, but without a growth component is the catch. So this part of the growing through addiction is, I'm going to try and stick to the how-to part. It's going to be focused with the how-to part. With that foundation, right? There's a process, growing the foundation, growing our understanding, growing if we think about our understanding as a big target, right? We want a big target, especially if we're just starting out. So if we're talking about addiction, growing through addiction, and if you hear me say transcending anxiety, because those are kind of the same things. It's actually transcending anxiety. And then I think addiction falls under that category. But, to say something that most people are going to be familiar with is going to be the growing through addiction part. So, and if it's something important that we want to understand, we want a big target, big target. So growing lots of context, adding lots of information to the concept up front. Okay. So this is like educational process 101. What the hell are we doing? What are we talking about? Let's start understanding the topic and growing a foundation, right? We grow a big foundation, and then there's fine points. And then when we're teaching, the cycle and follows the ebb and flow, basically, is that we've got the philosophy and the big overview, and then applied fine point. Philosophy, big overview, applied fine point. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Growing the context of addiction, um, growing that foundation and the cognitive thought process alignment, right? Cognitive growth and healing. If we understand these things, what we're doing is we're connecting to the most important tool that a human has, the human brain. So if things make sense through that understanding, right, the objective thought process, through implementing structures and processes that align with our ability to have objective thought process, that's really letting us have a big foundation, a big, nice, holistic foundation, that nice deep soil, if you will, to get started, a big understanding. So if we talk about growing through addiction, first, let's understand if we're going to do the thought process alignment method, which is what I'm doing, which is what we're doing here, thought process alignment method, grow the understanding, right? Grow the holistic part. When I say talk about these things, was really meditate on these aspects with ourselves. If I was telling an individual, I'm kind of assuming that this workshop, everyone here, although probably everyone's had experience with addiction, but is, off of at least the hard drug use aspect, right? If you're not, if someone's out on Facebook struggling with that, more power to you. Definitely stay tuned and you'll pick up some tips. But most of us talking about this have been through addiction, and now we're more or less on the other side of that, although still using tools that we learned from growing through the addiction process to help us grow in other ways of our lives, in other aspects of our life. And that's the lessons from addiction part, and still using those tools. So of course, there's infinite parallels and overlap, as there should be. There should be lots of parallels, pattern recognition, what makes sense, right? Is our sense maker meter working? That's pattern recognition. Again, connecting to our objective thought process. If this makes sense, and this makes sense, and this makes sense, and yes, we grow a foundation. We start off, we grow a big foundation, an understanding of these concepts, and talk about why we use these words, why we use these alignment tools, and these meditations, these little quick clips here, like growing healthy habitat. That's a big alignment tool. When we grow through the addiction process, our meditation, our relationship with ourself is the first thing that we're really growing at the core. We're growing our relationship with ourself, because short version, in one way, shape, or form, in a main way, shape, or form, we haven't previously had a relationship with ourself, or a healthy relationship with ourself. Some people we don't really get that relationship with ourselves. And I will submit that a lot of times this growing through addiction process is the foundation for growing our poor relationship with ourselves. This is just a huge, huge thing. So anybody that is going through addiction, realize this, because there's a huge part to this. As a matter of fact, my notes, the first part of my notes, which I'm not going in order, obviously. The first part of my notes says key, be nice to yourself, right? Be nice to yourself. This is a process. Everybody's going through this process. And when I mean everybody, the ones that don't know it. And I can set a million examples of when I say everybody's going through the addiction process. All right, 99% of the population, 99.999% of contemporary population. Be nice to yourself. Think about, we're not quitting something, right? We want to turn this positive. We're not quitting a substance. We're growing the relationship with ourselves to a point that we don't want to engage in negative habits. I give everybody a moment to marinate on that or write it down, right? We are, again, it's not so much, we're not trying to quit because that's a negative, because there's really no stopping. There's no going back. We're growing forward, right? We're growing through this process. The first part is you are growing a better relationship with yourself. You're growing a relationship with yourself and growing a feeling that encourages you to not engage in self-destructive behavior, including behavior that's destructive to other people and things around you. So that's a healthy mental habitat where we're positive, where we feel positive. So growing through addiction is just like any challenge. Just every challenge we have, life is full of challenges. Life is challenged. The challenge of life and death facilitates life. Challenge facilitates growth. Understanding our challenge is key, and that's keep going back to the understanding throughout our lives. Adding context to our challenges is the first part, and that's building this big target. So building a big foundation to grow from. And growing this relationship with ourself is the goal. That's really the goal. And to start implementing meditations with ourselves, that if some people plain haven't ever thought about themselves, but they know that, oh geez, I've got a problem. I keep engaging in these negative cycles. All right. So admitting there's a problem, right? That's classic addiction. That's classic growing through addiction. You can find that anywhere from AA um, to everywhere. I don't even know all the different, drug rehab types, but admit there's a problem. All right. So it's a problem. Um, but of course we want to use the new positive terminology, and we want to use the challenge part. And there's a challenge. Now, there's a whole embracing challenge aspect. That was another wellness workshop. Oh, by the way, if you think this is going to be a short conversation, you are 100% wrong. And that right there leads to another aspect. Society is full of quick fix mentality. And to use that term very appropriately in this context, getting a quick fix, or finding a quick solution is the problem. That is a huge component of this, and it's rampant in contemporary society. So again, this is an ongoing conversation. You'll probably need to play this several times and keep on it. It's impossible for me to know where each individual is at. And some individuals might be hearing this for the first time. Some individuals might be hearing this for, if you know me, then you've heard it a bunch of times. If there's an individual that wants to reach out and say, hey, can you just talk about that a little bit more? Definitely hit me up. I'm very passionate about this this phenomenon, this human-centric phenomenon called addiction. And I'm here to help for sure, any aspect. Um, so that quick fix mentality we can feel when we go through that. And so knowing ourselves is knowing our habitat, right? So we've got external habitat, obviously the plant that we walk in, live in, the environment, that sort of thing. Well, we've also got our physical habitat, right? What's all in us, modern science, modern medicine, white blood cells, red blood cells, knee bones connected to the ankle bone via the shin bone and all that other kind of stuff, right? So then also our mental habitat, our emotional habitat, and our spiritual habitat. So reflecting the basics of what we know on interconnectedness in our external physical habitat, the natural environment, we're doing the pattern recognition thing, the human-centric pattern recognition thing, and understanding some pattern recognition in our internal habitat and getting familiar with our external natural environment, which of course contemporary society is not too familiar with on a whole. We'll have to get back to that, mark all these points. There's a trail and it mimics hunting and gathering. So if you've been out in the woods, if you have some relationship with foraging and you're walking along the woods and there's a mushroom, there's a deer, here's something cool, here's something cool. That's to me an exact, more or less, and maybe not exact. It's a reflection of how our thought process works. It's hunt and gather. So as we're going through, there's this cool thing and this cool thing and this cool thing and this cool thing. So use your GPS and mark the cool things that we need to come back to, and we'll come back to them. Quick fix mentality. Watch out for quick fix mentality. If we're connected to our mental ecosystem, our psyche, our psychology, we can feel anxiousness come up. So that anxiousness, scarcity mindset, another key term that goes along with anxiousness. So if you're working up a chart as we go through this, that would be great. I'd love to see it. But put scarcity mindset next to anxiousness, because that's a huge component also. And the anxiousness, that's when we lose consciousness. Okay. So all the conversation when you hear consciousness, right? Conscious, responsive as opposed to compulsive reactive. Addiction is a compulsive reactive state, lacking consciousness. So consciousness, lacking thought process, lacking awareness, not having any say in how our canoe goes down the river, right? So meditation, visualize these things. Here's one way to do it. Life's like we're in a canoe going down the river, and addiction is the eddy that we get caught in, or the waterfall. Probably even a better one is a waterfall that we go over and then we get sucked in the undertow below the waterfall because we're not paying attention. If we're paying attention, we can kind of steer ourselves a little bit, and we can see if the water starts getting a little bit rough and we paddle, 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 pull over really quick, stop, assess the situation, and then see, is there a good way to go around the waterfall? Is there some slower water, or do we have to portage? Do we have to carry everything? Do we have to walk around? Um, this addiction, big lesson from addiction is a challenge of life or death. And embracing the challenge of growing through addiction is life and death, 100%. Another catch in contemporary society, which of course, if there's going to be that caveat all through everything, probably as long as we live. So get used to it. In contemporary society, the challenge of life or death really is not very present. A lot of that learning curve has been straightened out. There's no bears. Bear with me on the bears. There's no bears. Bears are important. Bears, when we're in the woods, everyone can agree that a grizzly bear with cubs represents a challenge to our wellness. And that is critical when you're walking through the woods in bear country, and really anytime walking through the wood, if we're backpacking or doing outdoors things, if we're fishing, you don't want to fall in the water, you don't want to slip off a cliff, you don't want to slip and break an ankle 20 miles back in the woods, that kind of thing. If you don't have those kind of experiences, which unfortunately a lot of contemporary society doesn't, and doesn't have a good relationship with death and is afraid of getting hurt to the point that they're not growing, all these kind of things. But the awareness that you need when you're in, I'll say in contemporary language, engaged in outdoor activities is super critical. And it's critical we can take that awareness and keep that awareness into our own mental habitat and mental environment and watch out for threats, right? Like the waterfall, which would be anxiety. Watch out for this anxiousness. Watch out for this upcoming waterfall where we're going to get into a place that we're going to slip back into a negative habitat, or sorry, into a negative behavior. Yeah, habitat too, whatever, into a negative behavior. So having awareness of our mental habitat, having foresight of where we're going, and to use the common substance abuse analogy, and through my own experience and my own addiction journey, um uh if you're trying to quit drinking, uh don't go to the bar, right? Easy. Don't hang around the people that are doing lines that then take a step back and don't get in the car with someone that's going to take you somewhere that there's going to be a party, right? You organize your own external habitat, your own external environment, right? Internal environment, external environment. Organizing your external environment is definitely part to our wellness. And that takes consciousness and intention. Oh, there's the intention part that we talk about, that intention is the water that these ideas need to grow from. Being conscious, add intention to your awareness, to be acutely aware of what's going on in your mental habitat. And I say, use these negative cycles. That is the grizzly bear. So if you can draw a parallel in your mind, a little bit of creativity here, those negative cycles are the grizzly bear. So you have to be really conscious about where you are, both physically and mentally, to grow through addiction. This is a super, super key component, and there's lots of little tips and tricks, meditations that go along with that. And I'll say that again. You really have to grow your awareness and you have to grow your consciousness and look for these things that you are not wanting to engage in. Now, we've talked about that. Substance abuse, don't go to the bar, that kind of thing. The lessons from addiction part. And I think that this is the more holistic, and here's more context. Here's a lot more context, and just a huge part of this whole beautiful conversation is that the substance is the easy part. So addictions in non-physical forms is the more difficult part. Addiction in ideologies is the more difficult part. Substance substance abuse is actually almost too easy to identify, right? But what about some of the things that lead us to disconnect from ourselves in the first place, or that don't encourage that, right? We already said there's a lot of things in contemporary society that's not really conducive to wellness in our relationship with ourselves. Oh, let me just bag on that a little bit more because that's what we do here. Um, Materialism, the American way. We're going to get to that, right? Welcome to America. Materialism is not conducive to our inner work, right? So when we're going through boundaries, growing our when we're growing through addiction, growing boundaries is critical, right? Growing boundaries with for the substance abuse model, growing boundaries with people that maybe we've known a long time, maybe we've known a lifetime, maybe we've got used to and have trauma bonded with. But growing those boundaries is a huge skill set, and we had a wellness workshop called Growing Healthy Boundaries. All this is on YouTube, by the way, if you want to research some of those. Um, so growing healthy boundaries. So growing healthy boundaries with contemporary society, big part of growing healthy boundaries, growing boundaries with ourselves so that we're not engaging in negative habits, self-destructive habits, things that are bad for other people. So we're growing boundaries with ourselves. That's a boundary to say that, hey, I don't want to engage in this anymore. That's the first boundary that we grow is with ourselves, and then progress accordingly. And then look, oh, okay, how am I going to not do this? Okay, start looking for it first of all, right? So literally, we're looking for problems. Are you looking for trouble? Yeah, absolutely. We have to look for trouble. That's called foresight, right? Depends how you say it, depends on the context. Are we looking for trouble? Look for trouble, right? Switch that narrative. Instead of looking for trouble in a negative context, take that term, look for trouble in a positive context. Look for trouble. It's a lot better if you see a grizzly bear and her three cubs, 200 yards down the trail before they see you. That's better than 2 yards down the trail or 20 yards down the trail. Much better, right? So have some foresight. And this is what we talked about, getting in the vehicle with someone that's going to go somewhere and you're going to end up at the party if you're trying to quit drinking, this kind of thing. Foresight, foresight, foresight. Be conscious, be aware of all the possibilities that can happen in contemporary life that are a threat to our wellness. And be and contemporary society with its yeah, I mean, contemporary society is addiction. So no wonder there's a bunch of people with addiction problems because it's all contemporary society is. It's a reflection of that. It's a reflection of not doing our personal development and instead trying to fill those voids with everything except for what goes there, right? Addict 101, doing everything except for the key obvious things and trying to fill those voids with everything else. And for what's the PC way to say it? Western civilization. Definitely civilization is could be argued. I don't think that that's the appropriate term, but that's what they call it anyway. Welcome to America. But the hyperfixation on materialistic things direct reflection to not doing internal work. Wow, hey, that internal work is critical for the survival of our species. I'll die on that hill. The internal work sure is critical to the wellness of the individual. So it only goes to show that if our species is made up of individuals, if it's important to the individual, it's going to be important to the collective, right? Pattern recognition. So understanding these things in contemporary society, we want to, grow some boundaries with that. I think that one of the really tricky parts of growing through addiction is that when people quit the substance, not a whole lot changes. They don't feel real change, and it's more than just putting it down. I think we sense that. I think there's more than just putting it down, and then this is reflected in contemporary recovery. I'm going to bag on that term in a little bit too. Um, but in contemporary, yeah, transmuting addiction, it's not just quitting the substance because they say, well, you're still a dry drunk or whatever. It's rearranging your life. It's quitting the trauma. It's reconciling the trauma, which I'll include disconnect from self as a trauma. Um, is reconciling that and and growing and growing into something new. And that's where I have a problem with the recovery because we're not going back and fixing what was old. We're literally growing new as growing our new self. We're a lot of people, I think it's an introduction to ourself. Um, and also it's not only an introduction to ourself, it's an introduction to our core self. And that's a critical component and a critical foundation. Like we say, the challenge of life or death. One of my favorite sayings from people that have had extreme challenges and, typically physical challenges is people will say the worst thing that happened to me was also the best thing that ever happened to me. I'll say that about myself as well. The thing being is that when we have a real challenge to our physical, mental, emotional, spiritual aspect, if it's a life and death challenge, um, our core essence takes over and kicks out all the non-essential items. Just like for in extreme cold and hypothermia and frostbite, the body will stop sending blood to non-essential items. Our fingers and toes first, and and keeping our core warm is critical. But the our core essence, yeah, kicks out these non-essential items. For our mental psychology, it kicks out the junk. It kicks out the contemporary clutter of the light bills and the day jobs and the significant other and the car rims and the stereo system and the fancy dinner and whatever else, because all that takes up energy, all that's taking up space. And in a survival situation, we need to be functioning optimally. So we kick out the existential items. Then when that growth process, when that healing process takes place, our core essence remembers that life without all the non-essential items and kind of says, oh, dang, there's a lot of crap that I had that really didn't make a shit worth a difference. Probably most people have heard this concept before, but that's our core. So then we're growing a foundation from our core self. And I think one of these last workshops was ego, something about ego, transcending ego or solving ego or what is ego or something like that. But that's all the egocentric aspects that we collect along the way in contemporary society, all these non-essential items. Um, eh, you know, such a huge problem with people, um, with people getting the difference between necessities and luxuries backwards. People will say, "Oh, well, we need electricity." Well, you don't really need electricity. That's not a necessity. Technically, that's a luxury. We don't really need jobs. That's not a necessity. That's a well, it's hard to say it's a luxury, right? But it's a layer. It's an extra layer made up by contemporary society. So being in contemporary society and having to relate to these things, it's important to grow the boundaries on where those things are in relationship to ourselves, right? So if we're growing a relationship for ourselves, first thing you got to know is, hey, welcome, out of the frying pan into the fire, right? So yeah, good. You're quitting the substance abuse and substance abuse. And I'm gonna for everybody that's, else along and also quitting the ideologies, quitting compulsive reactive behavior is the foundation, really. Oops, I said quitting. Um, if we're growing through compulsive reactive behavior in general, right? Trauma bonding, perpetuating our trauma on others, um, whatever, infinite list that is, but it's all the same thing. Well, we're in contemporary society, that's an environment that has all those things, right? Um, and then I'll just throw some more out there. I like to say narcissism, colonialism, capitalism, right? We're steeped in those things. So if you're going to quit negative behavior, if you're going to grow through negative behavior, if you're going to grow a healthy relationship with yourself to the point where you don't want to engage in negative behavior and the negative habits, you need to grow boundaries. And this is the mental habitat. You need to grow some grow some boundaries, and probably pretty big boundaries between yourself and, first of all, grow the boundary between yourself and everything else. That's a start, because you need to have a fresh shelf. You need to have a fresh self, and you need to be able to sit with yourself. You need to be able to sit with that uncomfortableness and sit in silence with yourself and recognize yourself and start from there. So you have to have that core. So this is super, super critical to have that core connection with self, that core connection without ego, without the cacophony of contemporary society, without the screaming of contemporary society, without the cell phone, without the electric lights, sit with yourself. And this definitely, meditation 101, sit or stand barefoot on the lawn, on the grass, no shoes, get away from all the extracurricular items and connect to yourself there. Grow that foundation. Yeah, so just understand all these things in contemporary habitat that are very enabling to uh, addiction, to compulsive reactive behavior. Consciousness, right? Be aware of these things. Right now, we're growing consciousness, we're growing understanding of the whole situation, right? And be nice to yourself, take your time, don't get anxious about an outcome. This is a growth process that has nothing to do with a clock. And yeah, I have to say something about the clocks. That is not our personal development does not recognize a clock. Real growth doesn't recognize a clock. A clock is a man-made item that goes around at a consistent time, and nothing else works like that, right? So addiction, here's another way to see addiction for those of you that don't have substance abuse issues or that have never had substance abuse issues. I'll give you a little clue onto what it's like. Try to overcome your challenges, try to solve your problems without written law, clock, printed currency. Now, catch yourself from doing that and see how many times that your psyche goes to, oh, I wish I had more money. I wish I had more time, or they should write a law. Oh, it's voting season. This is perfect. This is perfect. Not gonna buy or vote our species into the future. Life doesn't work like that. Real life, right? The voting system, that's not really a natural system. The printed currency isn't really value. The clocks, everyone that's talked to me has heard this enough. I'm going to try not to go into it too much. But our personal development, our time is our lifespan. That's real time, is our lifespan. And processes, where we are in the process. But this growing through addiction is really transcending anxiety. It's really growing away from a compulsive reactive mindset and growing into a conscious responsive mentality. So, I mean, kind of just trying to be normal, right? And trying to be the best we can be. It seems the perspective, the skewed angle we have is that we're in a society that is made from is built from addiction, is a construct of addiction, is a construct of narcissism, is a construct of get, right? And get and accumulate. Well, you can't get and accumulate yourself in the same way that you can get and accumulate material goods. It's a process. It's an understanding. It's a relationship with ourself is a holistic relationship. Doesn't have anything to do with the clock. So we grow on our own time, and we grow through understanding. We grow through our own meditation. We grow through our own conversations with ourselves, right? So narcissism, keyword. The reason you can't talk to a narcissist is because they're not talking with themselves, right? Oh, okay, that makes sense. Pattern recognition, pattern recognition. Narcissist isn't doing their own work, and all all that unprocessed work is pushed out onto everybody else, right? Narcissism 101. Okay. So maybe we can add that to our context. If you ever say, oh, this person's narcissist, this person narcissist, this person, are you doing your own personal development? That's personal development. The narcissist doesn't want you to do a certain thing. The narcissist just doesn't want to do their own thing. Key component, a little bit of extra credit there on narcissism, but it's all part of understanding ourselves as humans and how humans function, and this part of the relationship with ourselves and growing our consciousness, growing our awareness. Remember the grizzly bear, remember the waterfall, use these tools, use these alignment tools, use the growth tool, right? This is growing a relationship with ourselves to the point where we don't want to self-destruct, and we don't want to destroy everything around us either. Those two things are hand in hand. If you're killing yourself, you're killing everything around. So you got to have that good relationship, with yourself. This is, we said narcissist. Now here's the empath aspect, is the empath is enabling the narcissist. So, the narcissist doesn't have a victim if the empath doesn't let it happen, right? Technically, the empath's the one that knows the shit. So if you know it, the narcissist doesn't know it. The person, they're farther away. The narcissist isn't sitting there going, yeah, I'm not doing my personal development. I don't need to. I'm just natural smart enough. They're like that whole thing. When you start talking about feelings and introspect, that's when the narcissist, meow, that's when they fly off the handle, right? Hallmarks of narcissism 101, right? We know this, right? Everyone knows this. When you start trying to talk to someone about personal development and feelings and emotion and this kind of thing, if that conversation doesn't go anywhere, that's when we say, oh, narcissist, right? But working on ourselves is there's a lot going on there.
You said that the narcissist isn't talking to themselves, but sometimes I see it and understand it as they're in constant argument with themselves. They're just in constant cognitive dissonance with their own thought process. Like they're just maybe that they're not having a conversation. They're just like you said, it was
Fighting
a
with
really good point right there. I
themselves.
really wanted,
They're
yeah,
fighting
what
with
you said about
themselves. They're fighting against themselves. And
mm,
oh, internal, external. And
Yeah.
then hence they fight with everybody else.
So, Craig,
Yeah.
hi. Hello, hi. Good evening.
Aha. How's it going?
No, I was just thinking, so I guess I'm still the field that I'm in now, I feel like when you, people will say narcissist, but how do we know how do we distinguish between a narcissist and someone that has a mental health disability, or you know what I mean, a behavior? It's behavioral.
Well,
Either way,
I think that that's one of those things that we need to, be really uh holistic about and understand that all these things, like we're in an environment
hmm
built from narcissism, right? And
hmm
I mean we're in that uh, narcissism, colonialism, capitalism. We're all in that. So it's safe to say that we're all perpetuating narcissistic tendencies in one way or the other. Certainly, none of us are truly sustainable. Um, you know,
perfect.
we have garbage. So, if there's and isn't narcissism the deeper, I would say, I would submit to this conversation in a long conversation for sure, just like all this, that narcissism is the foundation for much of the mental disconnect, because if someone has a frailty and they can't speak to anybody, and um, it's not identified, it's not addressed, it keeps growing, it keeps compounding, festering, if you will, that sort of thing. So and then this mental habitat of not knowing self and of not knowing each other. And I know that we've talked about this, is that a lot of people that are labeled as having mental challenges, even from varying levels of autism, ADD, ADHD, and whatever other kind of labels, but they're also like, no one is in a most people aren't in a position to relate to them and really undo that. And contemporary wellness is just, man, I mean, there's a lot. The 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 level that
It sounds
most
like,
people have devolved in contemporary society is really super low. So there's a lot
yeah.
of undoing and a lot of unraveling. Um, so I don't know if distinguish is yeah, for you and me to use that term loosely and know it's not, to know there's a lot going on there. I think, that's going to be, with the own individual. Sure, we can say that, oh, one person's too quiet, one person's too loud, one person's, inverting their trauma, another person's perpetuating it on others, stuff
Uh-huh.
like that. And I mean, whatever nuances you see, you're learning and growing, you're on the forefront of it. I just, you're on the forefront of it. And especially because you have some, traditional insight. And I know you as a person have, a good handle on, on energy and what's that, what would be the habitat? Let me throw this into the conversation too. How would these people be if there was if they were surrounded by you instead of you and everybody else? You know what I mean? What would these people that are labeled as these, having these mental defects or whatever, how would they be in a traditional culture as opposed to a contemporary colonial culture?
Hmm.
So that's what I look at it. When I look at someone, because yeah, there's variances in mentality, of course, but I look at it from a standpoint of where is this person like naturally,
Uh-huh.
and then of course, the person hasn't, you know, the course people like that haven't even been immersed in a real natural environment. Where's that real community support? Where has that person been, for example, where have they been given a drum? Where have they been able to sit by a fire? Where have they been immersed in some natural things to get a handle on um life? Because that's the thing, we're all instinctual, and we're all relating to these natural forces in life, whether we know it or not. And so the consciousness is knowing it and aligning ourselves and recognizing it and help others, navigate that process too. But most people are like hugely unconscious of the basic foundations of life itself. So,
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I get it.
welcome
So,
to America.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else want to throw anything in at this time? We're about an hour into the program. Questions so far, comments, reflections, objections? Anyone? Anyone? All right.
Hmm.
Who knows what's going on Facebook? Can't
We
tell.
got a party going on.
Is Facebook popping?
Yeah.
Yes, it's always a party
Right.
up in here. My
Yay.
woo woo up
Yep.
in the prairies at the mental gym, man.
The mental gym. The mental gym.
It's Friday, pumping iron
Yeah.
over here. I can
Yeah.
barely keep my eyes open. It's, I
Here,
can't.
the mountains, waiting for it to snow. It looks so pretty.
Yeah.
Wow, check out your background. All of your backgrounds are so pretty. I mean, it's cool. Yours too. You look like you're in. I'm just kidding.
What's that?
I, I said, and your background is really nice. I like that the wood behind you.
Yeah. It's good to be home.
Yeah, it's
It's
good.
the outside.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll get up back on the after party here. I'll get back onto the main studies, and then
All right.
let's see here. What else did we go through here? What else did we go through? Where were we? Where were we here? Um, Yep. Growing healthy mental habitat. Cross training. So if someone came to me and said, man, I'm hooked on coke, crack, or heroin and have been for a long time, and I want to get off. Can you help? I'd say, well, I can offer some suggestions. And, along with what we said here, um, to is a cross training is what I would add. And I think that not a lot of people really talk about this aspect, but it's changing habit is the main thing, right? Because we grow, everything relates to structure. Okay, so here's the wildlife, fisheries, forestry. Here's the natural science 101 part. Everything relates to structure. And structure, um, structure, like if when a fish hides behind a rock, obviously we have houses, whatever is using, certain parts of its habitat for a home. Um, for example, you know, rough example, obviously there's exceptions, but just bear with the concept. Um, most freshwater fish aren't pelagic, not open water fish. Um, they go from they're kind of relating to structure on the bottom of the lake or river, and they go from a rock to a tree to uh to another tree to another rock. They don't really cross stretches of water that don't have structure. So there's nothing like floating out in space per se. So if we take that and then, deer and elk and everything moves, oh, they move from the woods along this trail to this meadow and then along, this valley and then up on this ridge. So they're relating to consistent, so to consistent materials in the environment, to consistent things in the environment. So if we take that observation and relate it to our mentality, we're looking for consistent things in our mentality. And then thus the pattern recognition, right? And pattern recognition, that's how we can pattern fish and animals. So we can say, okay, here's this kind of animal and they like this kind of habitat. And so it's this kind of year and this kind of day, and they're going to be using this kind of habitat. They're going to be relating to this kind of structure. So that pattern recognition, that is us relating to consistency. It's a consistency. Everything, has consistency. It's got patterns. Um, and consistency in the human psyche, a lot of times is, I'm saying a lot of times, just be general, but that's, equated with, what's the word I'm looking for? Comfort, security is the word I'm looking for. Consistency is related to security. So, but there's a lot to unravel here in the contemporary human. But since the contemporary human has been off of its evolutionary trajectory of relating to natural habitat and needing to know all these things to hunt and gather, right? Think about the difference between hunt and gather and all you need to know about habitat and structure and all the different plants and animals as opposed to now. Just do it quick, right? There's a huge void in our knowledge, and our knowledge is consistency. Pattern recognition is our true consistency. Our confidence in ourselves is our true consistency. Our confidence grows and develops from our ability to uh, engage in pattern recognition and identify challenges and identify another word I'm looking for, and to reconcile challenges, to reconcile variables, to reconcile unforeseen variables, right? And extrapolate our our past experience with what's happening in current conditions. So that's how we grow confidence. We grow confidence is that, hey, if things change all of a sudden and things aren't happening the way we thought they were going to happen based on our past pattern recognition, we can extrapolate and say, okay, then we need to do this. If for some reason the elk aren't moving through here for this year, then we need to do this. Then we need to do this. If a fire is coming this way, we need to do this. If a flood's coming this way, we need to do this. So again, in a natural habitat, there's unforeseen variables. And of course, that doesn't go anywhere. We still have unforeseen variables coming through even contemporary society because we're still human, because we're still on the planet. So confidence and relating to consistency is a key component of being human. And now if we were constantly running from floods and fires and not finding game where we found where we thought it would be, well, we wouldn't be here, right? So obviously that having a certain amount of consistency is important, but when we don't have enough consistency, that triggers something in our in our in our psyche, and then we get anxious. There's the anxiety, right? To watch out for this anxiety. And so when that anxiety happens, we've got that's when we've got a choice. We've got the choice to either recognize the anxiety, transcend and transmute it, and engage in some conscious constructive thought and analyze the situation, do our objective thought processing, yes, and make a decision. Now, not just objective thought processing, because it sounds like I'm not saying that right, processing, but also that includes our instinct, our emotional intelligence, and our ancestral wisdom. So, we've got some different facets to relate to, not just all objective thought processing, right? Because intelligence includes our instinct, includes our emotional intelligence, includes our ancestral wisdom. But when we don't have consistency, we get scarcity mindset, and we'll have a tendency to grab onto, whatever's next, whatever's best. So with the human being out of its evolutionary role with all these consistencies, and including consistency of cultural practices, there's huge voids left in our psyche. And now people will grab onto, and welcome to addiction, people will grab onto what's next. Oh, security blanket. Let's 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 disregard the elephant in the room. Let's disregard our internal frailty, or let's disregard our challenges. Let's disregard our personal development. Let's start drinking, start drugging, fill the voids with money, fill the voids with materialism, fill the voids with food, fill the voids with ideologies, fill the voids, fill the voids, fill the voids. Make up. So there's a psychosis, and that people make up something that they can relate to. And a lot of that includes making up a story that things aren't as bad as they are. Welcome to contemporary society again, killing itself and its and the planet. But where's that conversation other than here?
Yeah. I
So
was gonna say here.
but as a species that has the capacity to reason, it would reason that we try and fix some of that shit in accordance with like the challenge of life or death, uh, and that just not there yet, right? So grabbing on to things that so this is all about relating to unhealthy structure. So being in abusive relationships, it's still the consistency, right? But it's, what do they say? Well, at least it's someone, right? And that's the classic don't drink the poison just because you're thirsty. That's a huge part of transmuting anxiety. That's a huge part of growing through addiction, is sitting with that uncomfortableness and not doing those things, not drinking the poison just because we're thirsty, not going ahead with these past habits that we can identify as being negative, and not continuing these past relationships that we can identify as being negative, and not relating to ideologies that we can identify as not making sense, or the classic not working, right? The original right or wrong is, does it work or does it not work? Oh, it's voting season. Welcome to America again. Does America work or does it not work? Come on, people. Let's, addiction 101, admit there's a problem, right? I mean, what are we doing here? Keep doing the same thing. Addiction 101, doing everything except for admitting the problem. Yeah. Democrats say it's the Republicans. Republicans say it's the Democrats. Okay. So that's all there is. And so half the people say this half isn't working. Half the people say this half isn't working. Well, both of them are half right. That makes it doesn't work. It's not a truly functioning system, right? Doesn't recognize the natural human habitat or habit. I could provide a little bit more context, even though I've done it a gazillion times, probably a gazillion times every day. But you can't mandate wellness. Can't mandate human behavior. We all know this. You can't mandate freedom. We all know this. Freedom, 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 mandated. There's a million laws saying what not to do. How is that freedom? There's no suggestions around each law saying how to grow ourselves, so we don't feel like we need to do things that are not conducive to a healthy culture. Where's that conversation other than here? But for positive, that's why we say we're not quitting addiction. We don't want to say quitting drugs. We're not trying to we are, yeah, don't do them. But the main process, what's the healthy alternative, right? We want to grow into something that doesn't want to engage in negative behavior. We want to talk positively. We want to find the positive angle to embrace the challenge. Oh, embracing challenge. That's a positive. It's not a struggle. It's embracing challenge. Why can't all our hardships be embracing challenge? Why can't we understand that we have to embrace a shit ton of challenges because they haven't been done before? Let's align with some real shit is the thing. Because when we don't have a solid foundation, when we're off in space without any structure, trying to solve our problems with government money clocks, that is not conducive to wellness. It's not a solid foundation for anything really, but for sure not a solid foundation for an organic organism to relate to. And so let's transcend all that stuff. And here's a meditation, right? Here's growing boundaries. Transcend all the contemporary ideologies. Don't be Democrat, Republican, don't be American, don't even be human, be an organic organism, grow a foundation, be an organic organism on this planet. Don't forget the on this planet part, because that part's important. Um,
Don't be a parasite.
oh yeah, well, but even I mean, parasites Parasites have their
What
place.
did we say?
Everything natural has its place.
Pathogen.
Yeah, but I mean, to an extent, though. See, that's only good to an extent, because if you're relating to natural, then you're going to have, I know, and I've used this term too, but that's because someone's at this point. Now you're not at that point anymore. Now you need to know that there's nothing wrong with pathogens. Pathogens are like, hey, we got a place, man. So everything natural has a place. So, aligning with that, aligning our thought process with that is important. Yeah, it's an easy little quick tip to go, don't be a pathogen, don't be parasitic. But, the reality of the whole context is that, all those are part of an intact ecosystem. So, let's have a balanced, intact ecosystem. Because if we say, if we were to use that, thanks for modeling that. If we were to say, oh, our human frailty is like pathogens and parasites, yeah, we need to address them, and we need to, grow boundaries. Our natural human frailty, we have natural challenges that need to be reconciled, and they are growth tools, because our challenge, right? Challenge of life or death facilitates life. Challenge creates growth. By doing that introspect, by, oh, you know what? I'm uncomfortable with this. I'm anxious about this. I'm, whatever, confidence issues we have, that's for us to know ourselves and, work with those things, either to recognize, yeah, that's just not me, or to grow, um, you know, to grow ourselves that way, and understand where we all fit together, because we all have, different, attributes and different aptitudes.
Mhm.
Yeah, cross training again. Back to the cross training. The cross training is, if someone came to me and said that, they really wanted to quit crack or heroin, and I would start talking about this, um, negative cycles, and start slow. But I would say, put the potato chips down first. Start on something smaller, and work your way up. So we're cross training. So start, you know, trying to quit smoking, trying to quit chocolate, quit something else. And if we're trying to, um, transmute anxiety and not get stuck in compulsive reactive behavior, catch ourselves when we start relating to government money clocks as solutions. Now, not saying not to use them. It's their tools. This is about tools and about use and abuse of tools, because really, medicines have been used and not abused since people have been people. It's just our current habitat is very, contemporary habitat is very conducive to the abuse of just about everything, and hence addiction, right? They say the difference between poison and medicine is the dosage. It's okay to have a couple material things, but not the sole focus be on material things. It's okay to use value placeholder printed currency, instead of tangible items, but when the focus switches from the from what's being represented to the representative, then it's a problem. So we can cross train and just quit one thing at a time, and focus on one thing at a time, and start picking away at these changes that we want to make in our behavior. And even if you, now I'm going to say, use the clock, if you're used to, um, waking up at a certain time, and if that's your life, if you've always woke up at 7 o'clock, change it to, 6:43 or something, but start doing something different. Start implementing different things in your life. And then this is the growing healthy habitat part, is as you stop doing one thing, what you want to do is you want to introduce something else into your habitat that takes its place. Instead of eating chocolate, eat, find a healthy alternative, find some kind of dried fruit, or instead of eating, Snickers chocolate, graduate to a, free range chocolate, um, with no additives, something like that. Little increments help, but start cross training yourself and start introducing new things into your mental habitat. If you haven't done a lot of personal development work before, start watching YouTube videos from Eckhart Tolle, or Sadhguru, or Gabor Mate. Definitely Gabor Mate if we're talking about addiction. Feel free to hit me back anytime, anybody, if they want me to repeat that uh, in person, or, text, email, whatever, message. Yeah, so start watching Gabor Mate, or who's another one that's really good about addiction is Jim LaPierre. Jim LaPierre is another good one about addiction, but start getting in on those groups. Oh, where's Harlan Eaglebear at? And there's lots of addiction workshops going on. Lots of people that hold addiction workshops. Starting engaging in that. And if someone's talking about addiction, the first thing I said is food, is start bringing healthy foods in, right? Watch what you're eating, change simple intake, right? We talk about a simple process, healthy food, healthy food, healthy food. And then what kind of exercise? A little bit of exercise and a little bit of healthy mental stimulation, because all those things add up. Because if we're doing this, if we're eating right, we're inclined to exercise. If we're exercise, we're inclined to eating right. Start aligning, start trying to get a good feeling going that we can relate to. And that can be our new structure. It can be our new habitat. Start relating to things that actually feel good, that we can consciously, objectively identify as good, sustainable, long-term changes to our behavior, good, sustainable, long-term additions to our mental habitat. That is a big part of that. So watching out for understanding the whole context of things, growing this relationship with ourself, trying to get that good feeling, do some things to where you can get that good feeling. I guarantee if you start eating better, exercising, watching positive personal development videos on YouTube, you will start feeling better. And that one first time when you feel something, hang on to that. Hang on to that the same way that you hyper focus on whatever quick fix you're looking for. Hang on to that bit of wellness. And you know what? If it goes away, if it gets away from you, don't worry. You know how to get it back. Eat right, exercise, get it back. Hold on to that. Cherish that wellness. Cherish your wellness journey. Start getting to the point where, you're putting, oh, here's a little vibe that I got when I didn't buy a Snickers bar, and when I bought the good chocolate again. That's a step. That's a step. And take those steps. This is not a timed event. Don't worry about the clock. All you need to worry about is you and the relationship with you, and take those small steps, right? One day at a time, one step at a time. Take those small steps, and look, now you've got a good vibe here. Now you've got a good vibe here. Now you got a good vibe here, and keep those. And then, don't let those get sucked away. Keep those, nurture those, right? Nurture, give energy to these ideas within yourself, give energy to your habitat. That's what we're saying is intention is the water, understanding is the soil, an idea is the seed, intention is the water, action is the sunlight. So understanding all these things, then these ideas of change and these ideas that we want to nurture these good feelings and give good feelings to them and grow them and have them grow and multiply in our natural habitat. That's the intention. Grow that intention, grow your understanding with the word intention, grow your understanding with the word relationship, with a relationship with yourself, have a reciprocal relationship with yourself, have a reciprocal relationship with yourself, cross train, have a reciprocal, healthy relationship with everything else, fair trade, exchange, your energy exchange, watch where your energy goes. Energy is our first commerce, watch where it goes. Fair trade, reciprocity, make sure your energy exchange is reciprocal. Keep your authenticity on. Make sure that your thoughts are going in a positive direction. Watch your thoughts, transmuting anxiety. Watch yourself to where your thoughts start being, negative Nancy. Don't let your thoughts hang out with negative Nancy. Don't judge because you don't really know where it's going. That's life. This growing through addiction is a challenge, and you can't see it when you're in it. It is one of those things that you have to go through, you have to do. And like I said, my addiction journey now, it was a positive experience because I learned when I nothing's the only time something's negative is when we don't grow from it. So understand this, embrace this journey, this wellness journey, with growing with yourself and growing your relationship with yourself. And if you fall off, don't beat yourself up over it. Be nice to yourself. Just start where you know to start and keep going. And just keep going is the thing. You got to give yourself that time to that ebb and flow is super, super important. So that's something that's not recognized in contemporary society. It just says go, 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 go. But if you feel yourself, it's actually a natural cycle. So you'll make a big push on your wellness journey, and then you might ebb a little bit. And sometimes that ebb might be a little bit uncomfortable, but sit with that. Just make sure you don't lose intention. Make sure you don't lose your connection with your growth, with your goal. And I think the last thing is get your butt out of the way. If you don't just. No just but. And when you're talking to yourself, don't but this, but that. But, but we got to vote, but we got to do this, but yeah. Just get your butt out of the way. You can still do all those things. Just don't say that word. And in your own psychology, know when you're using another synonym. Don't use the synonyms. No buts, no just, or I was just. Those are excuses. And in addiction, growing through addiction, we don't do excuses. Do whatever you need to do. But the main thing is just don't use those words. Still do whatever you're going to do, whatever, but don't use those words, and you'll see the difference. You'll see what's going on. You'll see all the shit that follows those words. And you got to have a good relationship with the words work and the word serious. And and you got to have a good relationship with a challenge of life or death. Challenge of life and death can't have a negative connotation. Those are things that you need to meditate on. You need to grow that relationship, and that's where the work is. You need to meditate on them. You need to know them inside and out. You need to have good relationships with those things. You have good relationships with challenge of life or death. You need to have good relationships with your cycles, with your ebb flow, with your sustainability, with your connection to everything, with your balance. You need to have good relationship with the concepts behind the word work, the concepts behind the word serious. We did a workshop on those, so go back and check out the YouTube for there, message me. And wishing everybody much success on your growing through addiction journey. My name is Kraig Smyth, MyBizGuide, Business of Being Human, with tonight's wellness workshop, Growing Through Addiction. Thanks everybody for being here on a Friday night. Hope this was good for everybody. I think it's a super critical conversation to have, ongoing, long conversation. Obviously, this is not a set it and forget it. This is not quick fix, right? You see how there's no quick fix here? That's very key. So I'm going to sign off of the Facebook. And so everybody on Facebook, take care. Thanks for eavesdropping. Thanks for hanging out. And we will get on to the Zoom after party. Bye now.